This is Excellent Man, issue 12, Nate Fenix's series. And this is a series I have been critical of for having very little happen in it. But this issue comes from a brief bubble when this series was being written by a talented writer. I mentioned this issue and this story in that Generation Next crossover because they kept doing this same thing where they would tease Nate Fenix joining a team and then at the last minute turn around and say no. This is the first time they did it, and the team he is potentially going to join is Excalibur, who I might just call the Excellent Men at any point in this review. For 6 issues, this book is written by John Ostrander, who far and away is the best person to ever write this book. He is not an overrated hack or a bad editor or a xenophobic bigot. He is just an actual writer, so he is the best by default. Nate Fenix has arrived in Scotland to have Boar and Myra MacDonald do some tests on his muty powers. We begin with action since he is mistaken for an enemy by Excalibur. We have Captain Britain, but this is the 90s and flags are not cool, so he isn't wearing a costume based on his country's flag, and instead he has a ponytail, which is much cooler than national symbols. Our here, it is Steelman giving Nate Fenix a knuckle sandwich, and on the next page he is likewise greeted by Buffy Pride and the Smurf before Boar and Myra breaks it up. If this was Jeff Noble's writing or Brett Kavanaugh, these first 4 pages would be the comic. It would be dragged out and I would have fuck all to talk about. But because it's not, we actually have a plot and character stuff going on. Nate Fenix has had power fluctuations, and he is afraid he might have muty AIDS, so he has come to get the AIDS test from Boar and Myra. Here is some subplot set up for what will become one of the book's resident supporting characters. She ends up being the mother to Nate Fenix's child, but we didn't talk about that ever. It's honestly forgotten about. So Boar and Myra, she runs some tests on Nate Fenix, and I didn't like Boar and Myra as evidenced by her name, but it was right about now when Boar and Myra almost had an interesting thing. Boar and Myra was almost interesting Myra. She had contracted muty AIDS, even though she was not a muty, and she is the first and the only human to get the disease. That was intriguing, and she was determined to find a cure, and that was a good motivation and use of her, and she was finally not boring to read about. Now that Jonathan Huckleberry has retconned both her status as a human and the threat of her dying. This is all nothing but a total farce. If this is her 7th life or a 3rd life or whatever, why is she having internal monologues and motivations that stem from both her fear of dying and her fear of the possibility that this deadly disease has spread to humans, when she apparently knows she is secretly a mutie all along? So then we have Wolf's Girl, and she thinks Nate Fenix is a hunk, because why not? And we start setting up a friendship and maybe even a romantic pairing with Nate Fenix and Wolf's Girl. I mentioned how they did this too. They would set up relationships and connections between Nate Fenix and the other people on the team, and really sell you on the idea that he would join them, but then he won't, and these relationships and dynamics are never seen again. I cannot think of a single comic where Nate Fenix and Wolf's Girl even share a scene together after this. But Bo and Myra has discovered that Nate Fenix has a genetic disorder. That means he will eventually die from using his powers. He will burn out and he'll be dead by 21. And just like that, this book suddenly has a sense of urgency and purpose and a point. It is astounding what a talented writer can do for a book. Nate Fenix also bumps into a naughty mutie who they have in custody, and he gaslights Nate Fenix about how Bo and Myra and the rest of them are just going to lock Nate Fenix away like him. So Nate Fenix goes to confront Bo and Myra and reads in her mind about how he is going to die, and he gets confused and scared, and he does an explosion which is seen by Smurf and Steelman, and this is continued in Excalibur issue 95. And if I review that, I might tell the story about how I maybe had a midlife crisis for a week at the age of 22. In a surprise twist that no one will see coming, I recommend this. The two-parter in general, it's a good sampler of both these books and shows their promise. Regrettably, I think this is John Ostrager's final issue on Excellent Man, but I rate this comic a 7 thumbs up.